Often when you hear of serial killers or kingpins, men come to your mind. But the truth is, some women have proven that you don't need a Y chromosome to be dangerous. This is not about gender equality, but some women have done better than men in some areas of life, even areas that wouldn't cross your mind. In this video, you'll learn about the 20 most dangerous female gangsters. Number 20, Elizabeth Bathory. She was one of the most dangerous women to ever walk the planet Earth. But maybe Elizabeth wouldn't have been on this list if her childhood was full of beautiful experiences. Elizabeth's childhood wasn't disturbed by poverty or negligence, as she was born in 1560 into a royal family in Hungary. But Elizabeth had multiple seizures that may have been caused by epilepsy as a child. At the time, epilepsy and its symptoms were referred to as falling sickness and treated in weird ways, which included rubbing the blood of a non-sufferer on the lips of an epileptic, or giving the epileptic a mix of a non-sufferer's blood and a piece of skull as their episode ended. Elizabeth soon got married to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, and she further had power, wealth, and protection. No one heard or saw anything suspicious about Elizabeth until her husband died in 1604. Rumors soon became accusations of Elizabeth and 4 of her servants killing hundreds of girls and women began circulating. She was accused of killing the daughters of the lesser gentry, who were sent to her gynaeceum by their parents to learn courtly etiquette. It was also said that Elizabeth would torture her victims with needles and other things before killing them. She was said to have killed about 650 people between 1590 and 1610. She was detained in the castle of Chete for the remainder of her life, where she died at the age of 54. Number 19. Enedina Arellano Felix de Toledo. Meet the first queen pin in the world. Enedina was born in 1961 into a family of drug traffickers, but her dream was different. She wanted to become Mazatlan Carnival Queen, but that dream was abandoned after her 2 brothers, Ramon and Benjamin, were wanted by the United States and the Mexican government. At the time, her brothers were working for Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who would eventually give them the drug corridor in Tijuana, Baja California. The Mexican government is aware of the Tijuana cartel run by Benjamin and Ramon, and after Benjamin was arrested in 2002, the authorities were unable to destroy the cartel, though it was seriously weakened. Enedina saw herself as next in line as she took it upon herself to lead the organization since 2003. However, Eduardo, who is also Enedina's brother, was also arrested in 2008, leaving Enedina as the ultimate ruler of the Tijuana clan along with her nephew. With her brothers gone, Enedina changed the modus operandi of the cartel. She used a more business-like approach, unlike the old and violent practices of her brothers. She forged alliances with other criminal organizations and dangerous men in the drug business, including El Chapo Guzman. But Enedina is still living free as a bird. Though she is considered a fugitive, her involvement with the cartel isn't publicized. Number 18. Amelia Dyer, popularly known as the baby farmer, who took the lives of several babies. She was not always a murderer. She was born in 1837 into a large family outside of Bristol. She was well educated and found pleasure in reading literature and poetry. Amelia got married to George Thomas, who was way older than her. The pair had 1 child together, and soon old Thomas died. Amelia was left alone with her newborn, and she had to find a way to take care of the child. She remembered she had trained as a nurse with a midwife who had taught her about baby farming, so she decided it was time to use the skill. Amelia advertised herself as a baby farmer, and when she got clients, she demanded a substantial one-time payment in exchange for her services. But instead of spending the money on the care of these children, she devised a means of pocketing the money by getting rid of the children. She started by overdosing the babies using an opioid solution meant to calm crying infants. After taking the lives of the babies, Amelia would call a coroner to confirm their deaths. She continued in this evil act for a long time until a doctor was suspicious of the number of deaths he was called to report. The doctor reported Amelia, but she was only sentenced to 6 months of labor for neglect. As soon as Amelia got out, she continued in her shady business, but changed her pattern. She used different methods to kill the babies and also disposed of them herself. One of the babies she disposed of gave her away as her address was found on the baby. But still, the police needed more evidence to apprehend Amelia, so they set a trap. The police used a woman as a decoy. They had her place an ad for a baby in need of a home. Amelia responded and set up a meeting only to walk into a police ambush. She was arrested, and further investigation showed that Amelia killed over 400 children within 30 years. It didn't take time to convict Amelia, and she was executed on June 10, 1896. Number 17. Maria Leon. Unlike most queenpins who took after their brothers or husbands, Maria began the deal of drugs in her three-bedroom home in Glassell Park, a neighborhood flanked by Glendale's Forest Lawn Cemetery and the Los Angeles River. It seems Maria had no help, in raising her 13 children all by herself, that she resolved to deal drugs. At least half of her 13 children were helping in moving the business. It's safe to say it was a family business. But in 2002, a Halloween bust led to Maria's arrest for narcotics sales and child endangerment, and she spent about 4 years in state prison. After her release in 2006, she was deported, but quickly re-entered the country and had a property in Victorville purchased for her. Maria was living her life, making more money in her business without the fear of the law, until her son, Danny Leon, also known as Clever, died in a shootout with Los Angeles Police Department officers. She had to visit Danny's grave, so she found a way to be there even though the police were present. Unknown to Maria, the police had one of her sons, Francisco Real phone, wiretapped. They got information about how Maria illegally entered the country where she was deported. Maria was arrested at her Glendale home with other gang members in the game. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison while the others pleaded guilty and served lesser sentences. Number 16. Samantha Lewthwaite. Who would have thought a former British Army soldier would raise a terrorist? Samantha was born to Andrew and Elizabeth Christine Lewthwaite in 1983. Her father was an ex-soldier who served in the 9/12 the Royal Lancers. For unknown reasons, the family separated in 1994. According to friends, Samantha was so affected by the divorce that she sought solace from her Muslim neighbors. Samantha was raised as a Christian, but by the age of 27, she had converted to Islam and adopted the name Sharafia. She met Jermaine Lindsay, who had also converted to Islam on the internet, and arranged to meet him. The two eventually got married on October 30th, 2002, under the names Asmantara and Jamal. In 2005, while Samantha was 7 months pregnant with their second child, Lindsay killed 26 people and himself via suicide bombing. Samantha was interviewed after the attack, and she denied any knowledge or involvement of her husband's deed. By 2008, Samantha was already looking for another husband, a jihadist to be precise, and eventually, she found one. The pair had 2 children. Not long after Samantha had her 4th child, her new husband also died on a terrorist mission. The police began to track Samantha, and when she showed up in Mombasa, she had to leave hurriedly to avoid the police. The police found a fake passport in her home and discovered she has several identities. Further investigation showed that Samantha had possible ties with the Somalia-based radical Islamic militant group Al-Shabaab. She was accused of orchestrating grenade attacks at different strategic places. Till today, it is not clear what has happened to Samantha Lewthwaite. Number 15. Sandra Avila Beltran. While some people find their way into crime, some people were born into it. The latter is the case of Sandra Beltran. Her father, Alfonso Avila Quintero, was a former leader of the Guadalajara cartel. Sandra was married twice to ex-police commanders who joined her in the drug business and were later killed by hired assassins. Sandra lived without getting into trouble with the law until the police found more than 9 tons of cocaine on a ship in the Pacific port of Manzanillo, Colima in 2001. The shipment was tracked to her and her lover, Espinoza Ramirez. After more than 4 years, Sandra was arrested along with Espinoza Ramirez on 28 September 2007 in Mexico City. She was charged with and convicted of laundering money for billions of dollars worth of drugs smuggled from Colombia to Mexico. However, all of the drug charges were dropped in early 2011. After a lot of back and forth between Sandra and the authorities, she was sentenced to 70 months in federal prison, with credit for time served in 2013. She was processed to be deported to Mexico as an aggravated felony, where she was immediately arrested on money laundering charges. That gave her 5 more years in prison and a fine. Number 14. Maria Licciardi. Just like Sandra Beltran, Maria was also born into the Licciardi clan, a family that all belonged to the Camorra. Her father was a well-known guapo, a term used for a local boss, while one of her brothers, Gennaro, was also a very powerful guapo. Maria married Antonio Tegemie, who was also in the Camorra. Maria wouldn't fully get into the business if her husband was not arrested with her 2 brothers, Pietro and Vincenzo. Maria made history in her clan as the first female Camorrista to become the boss of the Licciardi clan and take over as head of business Gennaro left behind. Gennaro's death caused a lot of problems, which included an attempt to take over the clan, but Maria was able to keep it in a stable condition. Maria took the business to another level by introducing the prostitution trade. She reigned peacefully for many years until a disagreement arose between the Licciardi clan and the Lorusso clan. They had loads of pure and unrefined heroin, which Maria said should not be sold as it was too strong and deadly. However, the Lorusso clan disagreed and sold it anyway. The sale of pure heroin led to the death of about 11 drug addicts in the area. This led to the split of the alliance between the two clans, resulting in the use of car bombs and bazooka attacks. The war resulted in about 120 deaths and made the police aware of Maria Licciardi's existence. On June 14, 2001, Maria was arrested by the Naples police and was ultimately sentenced to prison. While in prison, Maria didn't stop commanding the clan. She served her almost 8-year sentence and was released. In 2019, she escaped from a huge anti-Camorra operation against the Secondigliano alliance, becoming a fugitive, and she was later arrested in 2021 at Rome's Ciampino airport on the orders of Naples prosecutors. She was alleged to have been running extortion rackets as head of the Licciardi Camorra clan. Number 13, Natalia Baksheva. In her case, she didn't commit her crimes alone. She did it with her husband, Dmitry. Both have lived together since 2012 in a school dormitory inherited by Natalia's ex-husband. Dmitry had been tried for robbery and car theft, but all of his convictions had been extinguished. He worked as an apartment repairman and a general worker. Together with his wife, they lived an antisocial lifestyle. No one would have suspected they are criminals if their crimes were not discovered by an accident. Dmitry lost his mobile phone, which was found by road workers who immediately reported it to the police. On Dmitry's mobile phone were pictures of him with human remains, even holding a severed human hand in his mouth in one of them. He was interrogated, but he claimed he had found the remains in the bush. Later, Dmitry confessed to killing a woman who was later identified as Elena Vakrusheva, a neighbor of the Bakshevas. The murder occurred during a joint alcohol drinking session when a sudden quarrel began between Natalia and Elena. Natalia then told her husband to kill her rival, also actively participating in the murder herself. Elena was stabbed multiple times and died from her injuries. Natalia and her husband dismembered the corpse, keeping some of the remains in their home and throwing away others in the surrounding area. Natalia Baksheva was convicted in February of 2019. She was found guilty of incitement to murder and was sentenced to 10 years in a penal colony and 1.5 years in prison, while Dmitry Bakshev was sentenced to 12 years and 2 months in a maximum security prison. Number 12, Raffaella Dalterio. 17 years ago, Raffaella lost her husband, Nicola Pianese, to a gunfight between rival gangs. Nicola was in control of a lucrative drug cartel before he was killed. Raffaella had to take control of the business, but a lot of people were not happy with her promotion. 3 years later, she suffered gunshot wounds herself after she was targeted by fellow mobsters who were jealous of her control of lucrative drug cartels. In the shootout, her son, Raphael, was also injured. Remember the local mafia, Camorra, that we discussed earlier? Raffaella had ties with them, and so the enemies of the Camorra clans became her enemies. Shootings and murders were a daily occurrence in the area at the time. The deadly war led the police to Raffaella's doorstep, and she, together with others, was held on allegations of extortion, possessing illegal arms, robbery, and dealing drugs. She and her crime family are also said to have used violence and intimidation to tackle competition from rivals over extortion and counterfeit money trafficking rings. Number 11, Melissa Calderon. Another queen pin that shook the whole of Mexico is Melissa Calderon. She began her criminal career with the infamous Sinaloa cartel in 2005. She led the Damaso cartel, a subdivision of the Sinaloa cartel, until she was forcibly removed from her rank by cartel leader El Grande. Melissa had a boyfriend, Eric Davalos von Borstel, who was killed by El Grande. She started another relationship with Hector Pedro Cameraman Gomez, and together they led Las Fuerzas. The two launched an internal war at El Grande, which resulted in a bloodbath. Allegedly, Melissa is responsible for over 150 murders in Mexico and multiple outbreaks of violence in La Paz. On September 20th, 2015, police arrested Melissa at the Cabo San Lucas International Airport, where she attempted to board a flight to Culiacan, and she was sentenced to prison. Number 10, Rosetta Cutolo. After the whole of Camorra was shaken up, Raffaele Cutolo took it upon himself to renew the Camorra by building a new organization he named Nuova Camorra Organizzata. Raphael was soon locked up for drug-related charges, but the business must go on even in his absence. Rosetta Cutolo, Raphael's sister, took charge of the organization. She became the power behind her brother, passing on his orders from jail and taking care of the business full-time. Rosetta is brilliant with figures, and negotiation was also easy for her. She negotiated with South American cocaine barons and participated in high-level meetings with representatives of the Sicilian Mafia and Camorra clans. Without Rosetta, the organization would have collapsed. One day, while Rosetta was presiding over a meeting, the police raided her place. Luckily, she managed to escape under a rug in a car driven past checkpoints by the neighborhood priest. For over 10 years, Rosetta went under the radar and directed operations from a series of safe houses in different cities. In February 1993, police found her hideout, and before they could make an arrest, Rosetta gave herself up, saying she was tired of being a fugitive. She had been sentenced in absentia in 1990 to 9 years in prison on charges of mafia association, later reduced to 5 years. Rosetta was able to persuade the prosecutors that she was harmless, and so she was cleared of 9 murder charges. Number 9. Griselda Blanco. This is one extremely dangerous woman. She was born in Cartagena on the country's north coast, but she lived in Medellin with her mother when she was 3. Upon arriving there, Griselda chose a criminal lifestyle, and at 11 years old, she allegedly kidnapped, attempted ransom, and eventually shot a child. Before she turned 13, Griselda had become an expert in pickpocketing and ran away from home at the age of 19 to escape molestation by her mother's boyfriend. In the mid-1970s, she illegally migrated to the U.S. with fake passports, and there she began a sizable cocaine business. In April 1975, she was indicted on federal drug conspiracy charges along with 30 of her subordinates. But before Griselda could be arrested, she fled to Colombia. In the late 1980s, Griselda returned to the U.S. and settled in Miami. At the time, Griselda was already a figure in the drug trade from Colombia to Miami, New York, and California. Her return met the start of very violent conflicts that involved hundreds of murders. Although it is not clear if Griselda was actively involved or not, she was notorious for inventing the point-blank motorcycle drive-by killings. It didn't take long for the Drug Enforcement Administration to arrest Griselda and charge her with conspiring to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. She was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years. In 2004, she was released and deported to Medellin. On the night of September 3, 2012, Griselda was out buying meat when she was shot in the head by a motorcyclist. Number 8. Ana Cristina. At first, everyone thought she was offering a matchmaking service, or that was the service she claimed she rendered. But the truth is, Anna promoted prostitution by arranging meetings between men and women. She made a lot of money from the business, as her clients are people of high class. For 15 years, Anna had been the madam of such business, ruining the lives of young women. She lived on a 12-acre property in Monroe, which is about 50 miles north of New York City. Her cover blew when she tried to set a lady up with an undercover police posing as a client. Anna was arrested and charged with 1 count of promoting prostitution. She later admitted a charge as part of a plea deal, and she was handed a 6-month jail term followed by 5 years probation. She spent 4 months in jail before being released on a $250,000 bond. Number 7. Juana Barraza. Juana saw hell while living with her mom when she was younger. Juana's mother was an alcoholic who reportedly exchanged her for 3 beers to a man who repeatedly molested her in his care, and by whom she became pregnant with a son. Juana grew up to become a professional wrestler under the ring name of La Dama del Silencio, meaning the Lady of Silence. In the late summer of 2005, there were reports of murders that showed that a serial killer was at work. Witnesses said they saw the killer wearing women's clothing to gain access to the victim's apartment. The police had a breakthrough in the case when a suspect was arrested while fleeing from the home of the serial killer's last victim, who had been strangled with a stethoscope. To the surprise of all, the suspect turned out to be Juana Barraza, the Silent Lady. It turned out the witnesses had mistaken Juana for a man because of her body buildup. Juana was linked to at least 10 murders, but she confessed to only 4. Juana mentioned that her motive was lingering resentment regarding her own mother's treatment of her. Eventually, she was found guilty on 16 charges of murder and aggravated burglary, including 11 separate counts of murder. She was sentenced to 759 years in prison. Number 6. Thelma Wright. Thelma is known to many as an author, maybe before her book is read. She was once a Philly queenpin during the 1980s drug epidemic. She lost her husband, Jackie Wright, who left behind a drug legacy with ties to the Black Mafia. After Jackie's death, Thelma took the throne in his stead. During her reign, she orchestrated the transport of cocaine and heroin between Philadelphia and Los Angeles by utilizing her late husband's business ties. The business was booming, but all of that came to a halt in 1991 when 3 tragedies stopped Thelma in her tracks. Thelma's friend was killed in a shootout, her associate was arrested and sent to prison, and a month later her connect was taken out by a rival gang. Unlike most kingpins and queenpins, Thelma left the game behind herself. Though she had the support of her parents in raising her only son, she worked twice as hard to become a better person and eventually found financial stability working in real estate. In 2011, she decided to face the life she left behind once again to write a tell-all memoir called With Eyes on Both Sides, Living My Life in and Out of the Game. Number 5. Diana Lovejoy. Diana met her lover Greg on a dating site, and for the moment, they seemed like a good match. The two ended up getting married and had a son. Soon, the marriage began to deteriorate. It all started with Greg losing his job, making Diana the sole provider for the family. Diana would sleep sad and wake up sore, complaining that the work is too hectic for her and that it's been affecting her health and the health of her son, too. They consulted a physician who ran tests on both Diana and her son. The results showed that they are both in good health. Diana kept giving Greg problems, and in 2014, they both decided to go their separate ways, but the divorce was not finalized until 2016. Diana started having an affair with another married man named Weldon, who she met at the shooting range where he worked. Diana and Weldon made plans to kill Greg to eliminate him from the options of their child's custody. Weldon lured Greg to an isolated place, saying he knows how to get him his son's custody. Greg found the call suspicious and went with his friend. On getting there, Greg and his fry saw a man lying on his stomach pointing a gun at them. The two ran away while Weldon shot at them multiple times, hitting Greg once under the armpit. After the investigation, Diana and Weldon were found guilty, and Diana was to 26 years to life in prison for her conviction, while Weldon received 50 years to life in prison because he was the one who pulled the trigger and shot Greg. Number 4. Jemiker Thompson. Jemiker had a rough childhood living with her mother alone in Los Angeles. She found solace in her high school boyfriend, Anthony Mosley, known as Daff, who was dealing in marijuana. Jemiker started collecting payments for Daff, and so she knew much about the business. Jemiker started by selling between 3 and 4 kilograms a week, and soon it became a family business as Jemiker and Daff got married. They continued the sales and the business boomed, making them very rich. Not long after, Daff was taken out and the drug enforcement watching her thought she was going to stop dealing, but no. Instead, she recruited many distributors. Even though the authorities knew about her, they could not arrest her. But Percy Bratton, Jemiker's business partner, was arrested, which gave the cops a lead. He made a deal with investigators, providing evidence against Jemiker. She tried to avoid an arrest, but she was eventually arrested at her son's 6th grade graduation ceremony and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Number 3. Marie Manning. Marie was a maid in England before she got married to publican Frederick George Manning at St. James's Church, Piccadilly. George Manning has a suspicious background. He had worked on the railways but was discharged on suspicion of being involved in several robberies. Before the marriage, Marie was friends with Patrick O'Connor, a wealthy gauger in the London docks, and after the wedding, the friendship continued. It seemed like a normal friendship, but Marie was actually after Patrick's money. On August 9, 1849, Patrick dined with the Mannings at their home, unknown to him that they had plans to kill him. The Mannings shot Patrick at a close range in the back of the head and buried his body under the flagstones in their kitchen. On the same day, Marie visited Patrick's house and stole his money. Unknown to Marie, her husband had the same plans she had as he also went to the house behind her to steal from Patrick. Marie fled with most of the loot, while Frederick fled with the smaller portion. Marie was tracked down to Edinburgh, where she was caught after trying to exchange some of Patrick's property. Frederick was also found on the island of Jersey. Both he and Marie were found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Number 2. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen has had different run-ins with the law since she was 18 years old. By the time she was 20, she met 69-year-old Hatch Club president Louis Gratz Fell, whom she later got married to. Soon, the marriage turned sour as Aileen caused a lot of trouble for the man. She hit Fell with a cane on his head, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. The two decided to go their separate ways only 9 weeks after their wedding. On May 20th, 1981, Aileen was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for the armed robbery of a convenience store where she stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison on May 4th, 1982, and released on June 30th, 1983. Within 12 months, she took the lives of 7 men. All the men were motorists between the ages of 40 and 65. On January 9th, 1991, Aileen was arrested and incarcerated at the Florida Department of Corrections Broward Correctional Institution Death Row for Women, then transferred to the Florida State Prison for execution. She was later executed by lethal injection. Number 1. Judy Moran. The Moran family is one hell of a family. Apart from the fact that they deal with drugs, they don't bat an eye to shoot at one another. The Moran family was deeply rooted in their drug business, and they were feared by others in the field. That's because they were good at what they did and never made mistakes. But they made one mistake. They underestimated a newbie, Carl Williams. Williams was determined to take the Moran brothers all out. He started by taking the lives of Judy Moran's children. He started by killing Mark Moran, and 3 years later, he ordered the execution of Jason Moran in front of his kids. Soon, Louis Moran's Judy's husband was killed. It happened a week after the funeral of Williams' best mate and hitman Andrew Venyamin. Louis's brother, Desmond Moran, known as Tuppence, had never had much regard for Judy and made no secret of it. When Louis was murdered, Tuppence made it known he was annoyed that his brother's lucrative stash of pseudoephedrine had gone missing. Judy Moran has taken charge of all her husband left, but Tuppence was not happy about it. Judy knew Tuppence would be on her way, so she decided to have him killed. The first attempt didn't work as the gun intended, for the work jammed. The next attempt would go much better. Tuppence was shot multiple times while enjoying a coffee at the Ascot Pasta and Deli Cafe. Judy Moran and 3 others were eventually arrested in connection with Tuppence's murder. On March 9, 2011, a jury found Judy Moran guilty of taking the life of Desmond Moran and was sentenced to 26 years in jail. Which of these women do you consider the most dangerous? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.